Well, it's just a few short days now until Christmas. Is everybody ready? Everybody sorted? No, I'm not either yet. That's okay. Has anybody, let's just have a quick show of hands. Has anybody still got some shopping they've not done yet? Okay, I'm glad I'm not alone there. That's good. What a crazy time of year this is. Every year, we're caught up in this roller coaster of emotions, money, family, and time off work. You know what? There's no time of the year quite like this one. But have you ever noticed, we do things at this time of year that we never even consider doing for the rest of the year. Things that aren't bad things, but are so strange. But everybody accepts them to be normal just because it's what we do at Christmas. At no other time of the year do we drag a tree from outside, put it in our living room, and slowly watch it die. Is there any kids in the room? I can get away with this. Parents spend hundreds, sometimes thousands of pounds on their children and then give the credit to somebody else. It's bizarre. We expect people to eat things like Brussels sprouts, even though nobody really likes them. We hide pieces of metal, choking hazards, inside food, and then consider it a treat when we find it. We even set fire to some of our desserts. We wear hats made out of paper, and nobody makes us do that. We eat things that we would never eat for the rest of the year, like dates. Dates. Nuts with their shells still on. Any other time of year, you want the shell off. Christmas, you want to crack it open. Mince pies. Oh, I tell you, if mince pies were nice, we'd eat them all year round. Mince pies are not nice. We sit in heavy traffic, and we go and see a heavy goods vehicle with a Coca-Cola label on the side of it. We'd never do that any other time of year. We feel obliged to send everybody we've ever met a piece of card with a picture on it to tell them how our year's been. And then when we don't do it, we feel really guilty. I tell you, has anybody ever tried this? I might be the only one. I've tried to give up cards because I've got a bit of a thing with cards. I've tried not to send any. I'm 2 years in now, and every year I feel incredibly bad about it. I thought what would happen was I'd stop and everybody else would go, oh, we were just waiting for one person to do it, and now we'll all stop. It doesn't work like that. I still get them, even though I've said to people, it's okay if you don't get me a card. I don't send them, and every year I feel bad. I'm going to do it, though. I'm going to keep on powering through there. It's the only time of year that you plan your meal 1 month in advance and then eat so much of it that you feel ill, and that's okay. No other day of the year are you allowed to go to sleep after lunch. And then we eat the scraps of that lunch for days afterwards, and nobody minds. We decorate our houses in ways that we would never consider good taste the rest of the year. I mean, tinsel. What is up with tinsel? I just don't get it. It's plastic. It's shiny plastic, and we put it everywhere. We go and we stand out, this is a new one, we go to the post office and stand in queues to pick up things, and the queue we're standing in is longer than the queue we would have been in at the shop if we just bought it at a shop in the first place. But you know what? I love it. I love it. Because I love what Christmas represents. It's a celebration of one of the most significant days in history. A day that was really only topped by one other day in history that happened 33 years later. And I'm going to start reading a passage tonight that really isn't... Tonight? I don't know where I am. I'm going to start by reading a passage that isn't normally read in carol services. And it's John's version of the Nativity. The Gospel of John's a great book. Is anyone here for the first time, by the way? Just give me a quick show of hands. 1, 2. Can I just give you... Got a few here. Just keep your hands up, sorry. There we go. It's an early Christmas present for you all. There you are. And there's two there. That's some little Gospels of John there. Gospel of John is a great book. And I love the way he starts his book. It's completely different to the others. So I'm just going to read John 1, 1 to 14. So this is John's version of the Nativity. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was in the beginning with God. All things were made through him, and without him was not anything made that was made. Now, if John's sentence structure seems a little bit strange, remember he was a fisherman, so he mightn't have been the most prolific writer, but the heart behind it's great. In him was life, and the life was the light of men. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. There was a man sent from God whose name was John. He came as a witness to bear witness about the light, that all may believe through him. He was not the light, but came to bear witness about the light. The true light, which enlightens everyone, was coming into the world. He was in the world, and the world was made through him, yet the world did not know him. He came to his own, and his own people did not receive him. But to all who did receive him, who believed in his name, he gave the right to become children of God, who were born not of blood, nor of the will of the flesh, nor of the will of man, but of God. And the Word became flesh and dwelt among us. And we have seen his glory. Glory is only of the Son from the Father, full of grace and truth. And that's John's version of the Nativity. See, the passage that we get in John's Gospel when it comes to the birth of Jesus is totally different to the rest of the Gospels. Matthew, Mark, and Luke, completely different. And there's a reason for that. All of the Gospels handle the birth of Jesus in a different way to each other. And that's only natural. You know, when you're writing a book, there's a certain point of view you want to get across. So out of all of the facts that you have to pick from, you pick the ones that best make the point you want to make. The same as any writer of history would do. So Matthew, for example, Matthew's the first gospel in the New Testament. And he talks about Mary meeting the angel and the arrival of the wise men and then the escape into Egypt. And the Gospel of Matthew was really focused on talking to the Jewish people, on telling that the Jewish people that Jesus was their king. He was their long-awaited, promised Messiah, who was talked about in the book of Isaiah. So Matthew starts with a long genealogy, the family tree of Jesus. And then he includes the wise men and the gifts of the wise men, because they were all symbols of royalty. In fact, in his opening sentence of his gospel, he says, Jesus Christ, the son of David, the son of Abraham. For Matthew, it's all about Jesus was not just the king of the Jews, but even in terms of his birth line, he had a right to call himself the king of the Jews. So that's Matthew's focus. There's no shepherds in that gospel because it just meant that Matthew didn't want to talk about the shepherds. He wanted to concentrate on the kings. Now Mark, when it comes to the nativity story, well, Mark doesn't even go there. You see, Mark just skips right into the ministry of Jesus. His gospel, you see, shows Jesus as a man of action, a man who did things. So he jumps straight into the action. There's no time in Mark's gospel for a story about a baby. See, out of all the gospels, I guess you could describe his as like an action movie. Do you know what I mean? When you go to see Raiders of the Lost Ark, you don't need to see Indiana Jones as a baby. He just walks on screen, a hero. You know, you don't need to see a movie about Darth Vader as a child. Nobody wants that. I'm glad that went down well. Okay. So Mark has an enigmatic figure, this John the Baptist, appear saying, prepare the way. And then he has Jesus show up, 30 years of age already, and ready for the mission at hand. It's good action writing. He's just getting straight down to the story. Luke was a historian, or I guess more today we look at him as a reporter. So details were important to Luke. Luke was a detail man. So he goes into a lot of depth when it comes to the Christmas story. As a result, Luke's Christmas story is the longest out of all of them. And he gives a lot more information. You see, Luke also wants us to understand that Jesus came for everybody. That Jesus came for every man. So his focus isn't the wise men, but the shepherds. The common men who came to see Jesus when he was born. Incidentally, I often wonder about this. The shepherds, the younger ones who would have come, would probably have been still alive when Jesus was doing his ministry. And I wonder, you know, you can see Bethlehem from Jerusalem. I've been to Jerusalem and stood on the walls of Jerusalem, and you can see in the distance this little town. And I wonder if the day Jesus was on the cross, whether those shepherds were out in the fields that day. I wonder if they felt that earthquake and saw the eclipse. And I wonder if they thought back to that day 33 years before and remembered that baby. I also wonder whether those who are still alive, maybe a good deal older at this point, talked to Luke directly. Because we know Luke collected some of his information from eyewitnesses. I wonder if Luke spoke to those shepherds and they told him about that day where the angels appeared and told them about the baby Jesus. That's a story I'd love to hear from an eyewitness. But anyway, that's just me speculating. So that's the angle Luke takes on the Christmas story. And then we get to John. And when John gets to the Christmas story, he just goes cosmic. I mean, he goes somewhere else entirely. His version is all about what happened in the heavenlies at the dawn of time and how the world would treat Jesus. See, John's gospel just goes to a completely different place. I imagine it would be extremely difficult to make a nativity of John's gospel. Now, John was probably the last gospel out of all four to be written. He was older when he put this down on paper. Now, the first thing that means is that in one way, why would John want to tell the same story again that's already been told? He knows people know the Christmas story. There's no real advantage in doing a remake or telling it again. In fact, John does this with a lot of his gospel. He tells stories that nobody else tells. But also, what was happening at the time, people were already, we're not talking a long time after the death of Jesus, people were already distorting the truth and beginning to get things wrong. So by the time John wrote this, he was aware of that fact. Now that's people for you, isn't it? You know, we like to get things wrong. We like to change the facts. So when John wrote his gospel, he knew it was a chance for him to clarify some stuff, to set the record straight on some things. So John begins his gospel with a big issue. He says, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. What an opening to a book. What a first line. He doesn't go back to the birth of Jesus. He doesn't go back to the birth of John the Baptist. He doesn't even go back to Adam like the genealogies do. He goes back to the very start of time. In the beginning. Significant words. John is directly lifting the opening words of the entire Scriptures, of the entire Bible. In the beginning, God created. And he says, in the beginning was the Word. And the Word was with God. And the Word was God. See, John's not messing around. He's getting right into the nature of who God is and who Jesus is, right in the first sentence of his book. And as he continues, we begin to understand that when he says the Word, he means Jesus. John is saying in his gospel that the story of Jesus goes way back. That at the start of time, he was there. He was with God. Now, this cuts through a lot of talk people were having at the time that Jesus was just a man, a prophet, just an enlightened person. We are not the first generation, surprise, surprise, to have those theories about Jesus, that he was just a good man, or that he was just more in touch with God than the rest of us. And John is making sure that that incorrect teaching is put right at the start. Jesus was with God at the start and is God. That truth is fundamental to what we call Christianity. And John makes sure he starts with it so there's no confusion on the issue. We should never be confused on this one. Once you demote Jesus from God, you lose the whole thing. And John knew people were doing this. And the crazy thing is, despite John correcting us, we still get that wrong. The first warning sign of any cult or heresy is they deny this truth. Jesus was not just a man. He was and is God. As a result, when Jesus says he is the only way to the Father, or the only way to heaven, it's a good idea to believe him. John continues by saying all things were made through him, and without him was not anything that was made. See, just in case we didn't get it first time, John says it again. Jesus was not created, he is creator. All things were made through Jesus and by Jesus. There is nothing that is made that was not made by Jesus. You? Me? This world we live in, the universe that this world's in, all of it was made through Jesus. When God speaks and creates in the book of Genesis, John is telling us that word is Jesus. Colossians 1:16 reinforces this. It says this, "For by him all things were created, in heaven and on earth, visible and invisible, whether thrones or dominions or rulers or authorities, all things were created through him and for him." Here we learn they're not just made by him or through him, but also for him. Let me tell you, everything's about Jesus. Everything. And while we think about that, just for a moment, I just want to skip ahead in John's Gospel a little bit and jump down to verse 14. It says, "And the Word became flesh and dwelt among us. And we have seen his glory. Glory as of the only Son from the Father, full of grace and truth." The Word became flesh and dwelt amongst us. God became a man. And that's the miracle that we remember at Christmas. The events of Christmas are the most cosmically astounding thing that have ever happened. This God, this Jesus, this Word, the creator of everything, the creator of light, creator of the stars, of the planets, creator of the seas and the oceans, creator of every creature that walks, wriggles, or flies on the earth, and the ones that swim, creator of you and me, the one who knows how many hairs are on your head, the amount of times your heart has beat, and every thought you will ever have. This God older than time, uncreated, became a man and lived with us. The hands that held all of creation in them became the size of a single cell and grew, just like we do, over a period of 9 months into a baby. You know, Jesus could have shown up fully formed. God as a man in his 30s, ready to minister. He could have done that. He could have become flesh like that. Let me tell you, if you create the universe, creating a body ain't that hard. He could have just appeared and started his work. But if he did that, he wouldn't really have dwelt among us. He wouldn't really have lived like one of us. But he chose to be born helpless, just like we are. Totally dependent on his parents to live. You know, when we see that baby in a manger, we see the greatest miracle that has ever taken place. God in a cot. God himself loved us so much, he was willing to step into history as one of us. To go through all of the growing pains and temptations we have to face. God had to learn how to walk. Had to learn how to speak. The very word of God had to learn words. And as he grew and matured, people could see the glory of God. People could walk and talk with God, just like he was one of us, because he was one of us. Can you imagine the chance to speak with, to eat with, and to walk with God? Just there. Just to have God there, able to talk to him and have a meal with him. Yet people didn't know. They knew he was special, but they didn't have the full knowledge of who he was. There he was, right in front of them, and they didn't get it. We're told in verses 9 and 10, the true light, which enlightens everyone, was coming into the world. He was in the world, and the world was made through him, yet the world did not know him. Didn't know him. Now, it might seem bad enough not to know him, but it was worse than that. In fact, we're told this in the very next verse. He came to his own, and his own people did not receive him. Not only did they not know him, they didn't receive him. Means that they didn't know, and they didn't want to know. And it's so sad, even today. There's so many people who don't know him, but it's a willful not knowing. They don't want to know. They don't want to receive. You know, once Jesus started telling people who he was, and let me tell you, Jesus was not shy about telling people who he was. They wouldn't accept it. In fact, the whole reason they wanted to put Jesus to death, the charge they lay before him, was that Jesus claimed to be the Messiah. He claimed to be God. If anyone ever tells you that we've misunderstood Jesus, and Jesus never claimed to be God, they've never actually listened to the words Jesus said. Because Jesus was pretty clear. In fact, I'd say he was very clear. So clear that they put him on a cross for it. You cannot get away with thinking that Jesus is just a good man who was misunderstood and taken the wrong way by people afterwards. No evidence points to that at all. Jesus was very clear, which means he was either telling the truth, he was lying, or he was absolutely insane. But in no way can we ever say that Jesus was a good man or a teacher or a prophet, because that's just lazy thinking. That's willful not knowing. He was not a prophet or a good man, but God in human form. And if that's hard for you to get your head around, good, because it is absolutely mind-blowing. What's more, he came to Israel. He came to the very people who were expecting him to come. Israel was waiting for him. 400 years they'd been waiting. They were looking forward to it. But then here he is, and they didn't receive him. That's people for you, isn't it? We only want things the way we want them. And when God moves in a way we didn't expect, we don't like it. But John follows that up with a wonderful statement. He says this: "But to all who did receive him, who believed in his name, he gave the right to become children of God, who were born not of blood, nor of the will of the flesh, nor of the will of man, but of God." See, when Jesus was on the earth, not everybody rejected him. Some received him. Some knew who he was, and they believed. And to those people, he gave them the right to become children of God. He gave them the right to be born not of flesh, but of God. Because Jesus was born in the flesh, it became possible for men to be born in the Spirit. What an amazing trade-off that is. He was born a man so we could become born again of God. The Word became flesh in order to fix a problem. Man and God had become estranged. Mankind had got it wrong. The Bible uses the word sin. And it's something we all do. We all get it wrong. We're all selfish. We all mess up. And God couldn't be close to that. Sin put mankind in a very difficult place. Estranged and cut off from the God who made them. But because God became a man, he could become a bridge between the two. Because a baby was born in a manger, a man could die 33 years later and change everything. And mankind no longer had to be good enough, because Jesus was good enough for all of us. Thank God for that, because I'm still not good enough. What was required of man was something so simple: to receive him, to believe in him. And to those who do, he gives the right to become children of God. Some rejected him, others received him. Let me tell you, that same choice stands before each and every one of us. Receive or reject. When we receive Jesus, when we receive this truth, we can be born again into the family of God. We can become children of God. All of that stuff in the past can be just wiped away. He is the true light. He is the only way. He is the way, the truth, and the life. No man or woman gets to the Father except through Jesus Christ. Christmas is amazing. What a miracle that God took on flesh and dwelt amongst us. That in itself is absolutely mind-blowing. But the reason he did it is even more so. He did it so you and I could become children of God. And all we need to do is accept him and receive him, and let him change our lives forever. If you're someone who's not done that, you could make this the greatest Christmas you've ever had by receiving the reason we celebrate this thing in the first place. He was born in a manger, but he is King and creator of heaven and earth and of you and me, and he's calling out to all of us. Let me tell you, those of us who do know him, that choice is still in front of us every day. Accept or reject. Not only that, there's a world out there who needs to know and needs help to accept. What a wonderful thing it is that we can become children of God. Let's pray. Lord, I thank you for what we remember at Christmas time. Jesus, I thank you that you, who all things were made through and for, became a baby and grew up as one of us. That, Lord, you understand exactly how we feel because you've been where we stand. Lord, I thank you that you came so that we could receive you. And that, Lord, we can become children of God. Lord, I pray for every person here. That, Lord, we ask ourselves that question. Do we receive or do we reject? And Lord, I pray to all of us who say, I receive. I want Jesus to be the Lord of my life. That, Lord, you give us that wonderful privilege to be children of God. Lord, I pray this Christmas time, right across Teesside, we see people begin to receive you. In Jesus' mighty name. Amen. Amen.